My 20-year-old stepdaughter falsely accused me of harassment to extort $7,000. Police investigated for months while she tortured me in my own home. But I found recordings where she admitted everything was a lie, kicked them both out, and her social media victim act backfired when her own friends exposed her. I'm 46 years old, work as a construction project manager, and what happened about a year and a half ago basically destroyed my second marriage and almost completely ruined my reputation. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I met Vanessa. She was 43 at the time, an art teacher, and she seemed like a genuinely good person, one of those people who care about others and have that calm energy that makes you feel good. We met at a charity event where I was helping build houses for low-income families, something I did regularly because, I don't know, I always liked giving back to the community after everything I'd achieved in my career. The thing is that Vanessa was a single mother to a girl named Chloe, who was 16 when we started dating. The biological father, Timothy, had basically disappeared when Chloe was like 2 years old, went to live in Texas, and never appeared in their lives again, like no calls or anything. Vanessa told me all this from the beginning. And, honestly, it didn't seem like a problem to me because I'd already gone through a divorce before with my first wife, Heather. But that one was amicable, We just realized we wanted different things in life, and we remained friends to this day. So I thought, well, I know how to handle complicated relationships. I can deal with this. After dating for about a year and a half, Vanessa and I decided to get married. I had a 3-bedroom house in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood, nothing ostentatious but comfortable, and I'd kept it after the divorce with Heather because I'd basically paid for it with my work. When Vanessa and Chloe moved in, Chloe was already 16 and finishing high school. At first, everything seemed normal. I mean, yeah, there was that typical tension when one family blends with another, but nothing that made me think things were going to explode the way they did. The first few months were relatively calm. Chloe was polite to me, said good morning, good night, that kind of basic stuff. Vanessa was happy. I was happy. Everything was fine. But looking back, I should have seen it coming when Chloe started asking for things. First, it was the bedroom. She wanted to completely redecorate it because, according to her, the colors it had were depressing, and she needed a space that reflected her personality. Well, I thought, it's her room now. It makes sense that she'd want to feel comfortable, so I told her we could make some reasonable changes. Reasonable to me meant painting the walls and maybe buying some new furniture at IKEA or something. Chloe had something else in mind. She wanted designer furniture, a bed that literally cost $3,000, imported curtains, Persian rugs, like everything the most expensive she could find on Instagram. Vanessa came to talk to me, all nervous, saying that Chloe really needed to feel at home and that she'd been through a lot with her father abandoning them. I understood that, honestly, but I also thought that spending $10,000 decorating a teenager's room was just ridiculous. In the end, we reached a compromise. We spent like $4,000, which still seemed excessive to me, but, well, I wanted to keep the peace and make Vanessa feel supported. That was just the beginning. A few months later, Chloe announced she wanted to go to Paris with her friends during spring break. We're not talking about a school trip or anything supervised. No, she wanted me to pay for a complete trip to Paris for her and 3 friends, like plane tickets, hotel, everything. When I asked her how much it would cost, she threw out a number like $8,000 and said it like nothing, like she was asking for $20 to go to the movies. I told her no, that it was too much money and too much responsibility for one 7-year-old girl to go alone to another country. Chloe didn't take it well. She started crying, ran to her room, and for days gave me the complete silent treatment. Vanessa asked me to reconsider, that Chloe had dreamed of going to Paris her whole life, her whole 17-year life, I guess, and that it would be an incredible educational experience. Truth is, I stood firm on that one, and Chloe eventually got over it, or so it seemed. But the requests didn't stop. When she turned 18 and got her driver's license, she wanted a car. Not just any car, she wanted a new BMW 3 Series. I offered to help her buy a used Honda Civic, something reliable and appropriate for a new driver, but that wasn't enough for her. Vanessa ended up buying her a car with her own money, something I think she financed or something, and like 2 months later, Chloe crashed that car in a parking lot because she was texting while driving. The car was pretty damaged, and guess who had to pay for most of the repair because Vanessa's insurance had a high deductible? Yeah, me. Then came the dog. Chloe came home one day with a golden retriever puppy and announced it was hers. Nobody had given her permission to have a dog. She hadn't even asked. She just bought it with Vanessa's credit card and said she needed emotional support. The dog was cute, I'm not going to lie, but Chloe didn't take care of it at all. Vanessa and I ended up being the ones who fed the dog, walked it, cleaned up its messes. Chloe only wanted the dog to take pictures with it for Instagram. And speaking of Instagram, that was a whole other topic. Chloe was obsessed with becoming an influencer or model or something. She wanted me to pay for a professional modeling portfolio that cost like $5,000, with professional photographer, makeup artist, stylist, fancy locations, the whole package. When I told her no, that if she really wanted to be a model, she should start by taking simpler photos and building her portfolio gradually, she accused me of not believing in her and not supporting her dreams. Vanessa, of course, felt horrible about all this and was constantly in the middle trying to keep the peace between Chloe and me. I talked to Heather about this at some point. My ex-wife. I was always good at giving advice because we'd known each other for years and she'd seen how I was with money and responsibilities. Heather told me something that stuck with me. She said, "Gregory, that girl is learning that she can manipulate her mom by crying and making drama, and if you don't set boundaries now, it's only going to get worse." She was right. But I kept thinking that maybe Chloe would mature, that maybe she was just going through a difficult late adolescence phase. Everything came to a critical point when Chloe was 20. She wasn't in school anymore, didn't work, basically spent the day at home taking pictures of herself, watching TikTok, and going out with her friends. One day she came home all excited with a laptop and asked me to sit down because she had something important to discuss with me. I thought, well, maybe she finally wants to talk about looking for work or going to college, something productive. I was completely wrong. Chloe showed me a PowerPoint presentation she'd made. And I'm not going to lie, I was surprised she'd put that effort into something. But when I saw what it was about, I almost laughed. She wanted me to give her $7,000 to start a skincare business. She had all this research about the skincare market, statistics about how much people spend on beauty products, pictures of cute packaging, everything. She explained to me that she was going to import products from Korea, repackage them with her own brand, and sell them online. It sounded good in theory, I guess. But when I started asking her basic questions about the business, like, do you have a real business plan? Have you researched the regulations for selling cosmetic products? Do you have any experience in e-commerce? Do you know anything about digital marketing beyond posting on Instagram? She didn't have answers for anything. I told her I couldn't give her $7,000 just like that without a solid plan, without her putting in some of her own effort first. Maybe getting a part-time job to save some initial money, learning about the business, making contacts with real suppliers. I suggested that maybe we could review her plan together in 6 months if she demonstrated that she was really committed to the idea, not just in love with the concept of being an entrepreneur. Basically, I wanted her to show me that this wasn't another whim like the Paris trip or the modeling portfolio. Chloe didn't react well. She went pale first, then red, and then exploded. She started screaming that I'd never supported her, that I'd always been an obstacle in her life, that her real father would never have treated her like this, ironic, considering her real father abandoned her when she was a baby, and that I was just jealous of her ambition. She stormed out of the room, and I heard how she slammed her bedroom door so hard, I'm surprised it didn't break. I thought that would be it, that eventually she'd calm down like always and we'd move on with our lives. But this time was different. A few days later, Vanessa came home from work and looked completely destroyed, like she'd been crying for hours. I sat down with her in the living room and asked her what was wrong, and what she told me basically left me frozen. She told me that Chloe had come to talk to her that morning and had told her that I'd been making her feel uncomfortable, that I'd made inappropriate comments about her appearance, that once I tried to enter her room when she was changing, and that, in general, I'd had behavior that made her feel unsafe in her own home. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what I was hearing. I told Vanessa that was completely false, that I had never done anything remotely inappropriate with Chloe or near her, that I didn't even go up to the second floor where her room was, unless absolutely necessary, precisely to avoid any misunderstanding. Vanessa told me she believed me, but at the same time I could see in her eyes that there was a doubt there, you know. That kind of doubt that kills you because it means the person doesn't completely trust you. She asked me if maybe I'd done something that Chloe could have misinterpreted, if maybe a casual comment had sounded different from what I intended. That hurt me more than the accusation itself. The fact that Vanessa, my wife, the person who was supposed to know me better than anyone, was questioning me. I repeated to her that I hadn't done absolutely anything, that this was obviously Chloe's way of getting revenge because I'd told her no to the money. Vanessa stayed quiet for a long moment and then said she needed time to think, that this was very serious and that she needed to talk more with Chloe to understand exactly what had happened. The next few days were an absolute nightmare. The atmosphere in the house was so tense you could cut it with a knife. Chloe completely avoided me. Or when she saw me, she put on this scared victim face that was so fake it made me want to scream. Vanessa was clearly divided, trying to be fair but obviously leaning toward believing her daughter because, well, she's her daughter. I felt completely trapped because how do you prove that something didn't happen? How do you prove your innocence when someone is lying about you? That's when I decided I needed to protect myself legally. I hired a lawyer, a guy recommended to me by a work colleague who'd gone through a complicated divorce. The lawyer told me that these situations were more common than people think, and that I needed to start documenting absolutely everything. He suggested that I install security cameras in the common areas of the house. If Vanessa agreed, that I save all text messages, that I basically create a record of my normal behavior to demonstrate that the accusations were false. I talked to Vanessa about the cameras and surprisingly she agreed. I think part of her wanted proof one way or another. I installed cameras in the living room, kitchen, main, hallway, places where I regularly spent time. Also, and this was the lawyer's suggestion, although it was a legal gray area, I installed voice-activated recorders in some common areas of the house. Not in the bathroom or bedrooms, obviously, because that would be illegal, but in places like the living room and dining room where conversations normally occurred. During the following weeks, I basically became a detective in my own house. I collected everything. I had footage from the security cameras showing my normal routines, coming home from work, making dinner, watching TV, going out to work in the yard. I collected text messages between Vanessa and me, between Chloe and me, basically any written communication that demonstrated that our interaction was minimal and always appropriate. I talked to some neighbors who knew me well and asked them to write statements about my character, which several did gladly because they'd known me for years of living there. I also started paying close attention to Chloe's behavior. I noticed she was constantly posting on Instagram, showing her lifestyle, her outings with friends, buying expensive clothes, going to fancy restaurants. All this while supposedly she was so traumatized by my behavior that she couldn't feel safe in the house. The contradiction was obvious. I captured screenshots of all her posts, especially those showing dates and times, to demonstrate that her social life didn't seem affected at all by her supposed trauma. But the real breakthrough came about a month after the accusations started. The voice-activated recorders caught a conversation between Chloe and one of her friends in the living room while I was at work. I'm not going to lie. When I heard the recording for the first time, I felt a mixture of absolute relief and pure rage. Chloe was telling her friend exactly what she'd done. She said, and I quote because I listened to it like 100 times, "It's so easy to manipulate my mom. Literally, I just have to cry and say that Gregory makes me feel uncomfortable and she does what I want. I've almost got him convinced to give me the money for the business because now he feels guilty about not believing me completely." Her friend asked her something like, "Don't you feel bad about lying about something so serious?" And Chloe laughed, and said, "It's not like I'm going to go to the police or anything. I just need Gregory to feel uncomfortable enough to give me what I want, and then everything will go back to normal." I had more recordings too. Conversations where Chloe openly admitted she'd made everything up, where she mocked how easy it was to manipulate Vanessa, where she planned what else she could ask for once Gregory gave in. I thought that with this evidence, everything would be resolved immediately. But before I could confront Chloe and Vanessa with the recordings, Chloe escalated the situation in a way I didn't see coming. She came to talk to me one day when Vanessa, it wasn't home. She had this strange smile on her face, like confident but also nervous. She sat on the couch across from me and told me we needed to reach an agreement. She explained to me that she knew the accusations made her look bad too, that she didn't want things to go further, that we could resolve all this in a simple way. All I had to do was give her $50,000. Yeah, you heard that right. $50,000. She told me that with that money she would retract all her accusations, tell Vanessa that she'd misinterpreted my actions, and we could all move forward as if nothing had happened. If I didn't give her the money, she threatened to go to the police with a formal complaint, to tell her story on social media, to basically completely ruin my reputation. I was recording. The voice recorder in the living room was working and captured the entire conversation. I tried to stay calm even though inside I was boiling. I asked her questions to make it super clear in the recording what she was doing. I asked her, "Are you telling me you made up the accusations? Are you asking me for money to retract false accusations? Do you understand that's extortion?" Chloe, with all the confidence in the world, basically admitted everything. She said yes, that she'd exaggerated some things so her mom would take her concerns seriously, that she really needed the money for her business, and this was the easiest way to get it. I told her I needed time to think about her proposal, that $50,000 was a lot of money, and I needed to see how I could get it. Chloe seemed satisfied with that and went to her room. I immediately called my lawyer and sent him the recording. He told me that now we had a documented extortion case in addition to all the false accusations, and that it was time to confront this directly with irrefutable evidence. I spent the next few days planning exactly how I was going to handle the confrontation. I wanted to do it right. I wanted Vanessa to see the truth in a way she couldn't deny or rationalize. I organized all the evidence, the recordings, the Instagram screenshots, the neighbor statements, the security camera footage showing my normal behavior, everything. My lawyer helped me create a kind of presentation. Ironic that I used the same format Chloe had used to ask me for money for her business. I called Vanessa and Chloe for a family meeting on a Saturday afternoon. Both seemed confused but agreed to sit with me in the living room. I set up my laptop so they could see the screen. I started by telling them that I'd been collecting information for the past few weeks because I needed to understand what was really happening in our family, and that what I was going to show them was important for them to see with an open mind. I started with the recordings of Chloe talking to her friend, admitting she'd made up the accusations. Vanessa's face changed immediately. She went pale and looked at Chloe with an expression of absolute shock. Chloe tried to interrupt, saying that was taken out of context, that I'd edited the recordings, but I told her to shut up and wait to see everything before talking. I continued showing more evidence, more recordings, the screenshots where Chloe showed herself living her normal life without any sign of trauma, the neighbor statements about my character. And then came the grand finale moment. I played the recording of Chloe trying to extort me for $50,000. That was the one that basically destroyed any defense she could have had. Vanessa started crying silently as she listened to her daughter admit she'd made everything up and was now trying to get money from me for it. When the recording ended, there was a horrible silence in the room. Chloe was sitting there with her arms crossed, not even trying to deny anything anymore, just staring at the floor with this expression of contained fury. Vanessa finally spoke and asked Chloe how she could have done something like this, how she could have lied about something so inserious, how she could have tried to extort me. Chloe exploded then, screamed that it was all my fault for never giving her what she needed, that I was a cheapskate who had all this money and never wanted to share anything with her, that her life would have been perfect if I hadn't been there. She yelled at Vanessa that she was a bad mother for marrying me instead of looking for someone who really wanted to treat them well. Vanessa tried to reason with her, but Chloe didn't want to hear anything. She got up from the couch and ran upstairs to her room, slamming the door as she always did when she didn't get what she wanted. Vanessa stayed there crying, repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," over and over. Part of me felt sorry for her because obviously she hadn't known what kind of person her daughter had become, but another part of me was too angry, too hurt by everything that had happened, to feel much compassion at that moment. I told Vanessa that Chloe and she had to leave the house. Not immediately. I wasn't going to throw them out on the street, but they needed to find another place to live as soon as possible. I also told her I was going to proceed with the divorce because I couldn't trust her after this. I couldn't be with someone who had doubted me so easily, who had allowed her daughter to torture me for weeks before really seeking the truth. Vanessa didn't argue. I think she knew there was no going back from this. In the following 2 weeks, Vanessa found an apartment for her and Chloe. I helped her move because despite everything, I'm not a monster, and she'd been deceived by her daughter as much as I had. Chloe didn't speak to me during the entire move, acted like I was invisible, which honestly was a relief because I had nothing to say to her anyway. And the day they left, I changed all the locks on the house and could finally breathe calmly for the first time in months. The divorce process was relatively quick, considering we'd only been married for, like, 3 years and had no children together. But Vanessa didn't fight for anything. I think she felt too ashamed and guilty about everything that had happened. We signed the papers and that was it. Marriage over. But the story didn't end there. Chloe, being Chloe, couldn't just accept the consequences of her actions. Like a week after they moved out, she started posting on Instagram and Facebook her version of the story. She posted that her evil stepfather had thrown her and her mother out on the street for no reason, that he'd been emotionally abusive, that he'd manipulated her mother into divorcing her, basically painting herself as the perfect victim. She even created a GoFundMe asking for donations to help her and her mother start over after being abused. What Chloe didn't anticipate was that several of her friends, including the friend who'd been in the recordings admitting the truth, were fed up with her behavior. They started commenting on her posts saying she was lying, that they'd heard firsthand how she'd made everything up, that they were tired of her manipulations. Others started sharing screenshots of their conversations with Chloe, where she'd admitted parts of the truth. Her attempt to publicly victimize herself basically blew up in her face. The GoFundMe was reported and closed for fraud. Her Instagram account, which had like 15,000 followers she'd been building for her supposed influencer career, lost more than half its followers in a matter of days. People who knew her in real life started distancing themselves from her. Her friends stopped inviting her to things. Basically, she became a social pariah in her own circle. I, for my part, distanced myself from all the drama as much as I could. I kept the evidence stored on my lawyer's recommendation in case Chloe tried something legal, but fortunately she never did. She probably knew she didn't have a chance with all the proof I had against her. I also stopped participating as much in charity work, because, I don't know. I guess I felt more cynical about people after all this. I focused on my work, on rebuilding my life, on spending time with real friends who supported me during the whole process. Heather, my ex-wife, was amazing during all this. She reminded me that she'd warned me about setting boundaries with Chloe from the beginning, but she did it in a way that wasn't condescending, more like saying, "I told you so, but also, I know this sucks." We went out for coffee a couple of times while everything was happening, and honestly, those conversations helped me keep my sanity. It's funny how your ex-wife can be a better support system than your current wife, but that's how things are sometimes. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Vanessa was really affected by everything, that she felt terribly guilty for having allowed Chloe to get away with it for so long, for having raised someone so manipulative and lacking empathy. Apparently, she tried to put Chloe in therapy, but Chloe refused, insisting that she wasn't the problem, that everyone else was wrong. As far as I know, Chloe is still living with Vanessa. No job, no school, basically doing nothing productive with her life. About a month ago, I ran into Vanessa at the supermarket. It was incredibly awkward. We looked at each other. She looked tired and aged, like the last few months had added 10 years to her. She greeted me with a small hello, and I responded equally briefly. She started to say something. I think she was going to try to apologize again, but I just shook my head and kept walking. Not with anger. I wasn't angry at that point, just with tiredness. I didn't have the energy for that conversation, to relive everything again. The truth is that all this taught me that no matter how much you try to do things right, no matter how much you give of yourself, some people are just going to take you for granted or are going to try to take advantage of you. Chloe had all the opportunities in the world to be a decent person. She had Vanessa, who despite everything was a good mother who loved her and tried to support her. She had me willing to be a positive father figure and help her when necessary. But instead of appreciating any of that, She only saw someone else she could take advantage of, someone else she could manipulate to get what she wanted. Now my life is quiet again. I live alone in my house, work on my construction projects, see my friends on weekends. Basically, I've returned to something similar to how it was before I met Vanessa and Chloe. I'm not gonna lie. There are moments when I feel lonely, moments when I think maybe I should try dating someone again. But then I remember this whole mess and think that maybe being alone isn't so bad after all. At least I don't have to worry about someone planning how to extort me for money in my own house. A few days ago, I was working in the yard, something that relaxes me, and a neighbor came over to ask me how I was doing. I told him, fine, that things had finally calmed down. He told me he was glad everything had been resolved, that he and his wife knew from the beginning that I would never have done the things Chloe had accused me of. That felt good, knowing that the people who really know me never doubted me, even when my own wife did. And that's enough for now, I guess.